Thank you everybody for coming. So those who don't know me, my name's Dan Prince. I'm a professor of cybersecurity at Lancaster University. It's a real pleasure to have you all here to come to this sort of the Beyond Cybersecurity event redone. So this was an activity that John Lomas and I kicked off about a couple of years ago, mid-COVID. Yes. So it was all online, but the purpose of this is just to bring people together to have not your normal conversations about cybersecurity. But before I start into a bit more about that, just a couple of key things. So please don't take photos in the room. Please don't take photos out of the windows. We do have an official photographer and a camera person. They won't be taking pictures of anybody in the room. And if you're sensitive about getting your photo taken, please don't walk in front of the static camera, because that wouldn't be good. There will be photography later on over drinks. If you don't want your photo taken, as you leave, please pick up a red lanyard, and so the photographer will know not to photograph you. So one of the reasons why we're running this is Lancaster does a lot of work in cybersecurity. I'm sure many of you know this. And really one of the key things about what we want to try and do at Lancaster is to extend these conversations out more broadly to a wider community and bring people together. So it's whilst we have a lot of great funded activity, it's really core part of the Lancaster University mission as a civic institution to really go out to the public and create conversations and push the conversation, particularly around cybersecurity, forward. And that's the purpose of Beyond Cyber. And as I said, it's trying to not be your standard kind of cyber conversation. So you won't have too much of me, which will be a relief for many of you. It's got a bit of an unusual format. So we will have our guest speaker come and do half an hour talking about some interesting areas. And then we'll be joined on the stage by Ruby and Samina, and we will interrogate Ben on what he's just said. And again, just trying to kind of extend that conversation. And whilst we're asking questions, you can all be prepped to ask your questions, so there's no pressure to dive straight in and go out to the audience. So we'll have half an hour from our guest, and then we'll have half an hour of questions from the panellists, and then we'll have half an hour or so of questions from you. And then it's drinks and canapes afterwards, so stick around for that. So I'm delighted to welcome Ben Owen onto the stage to talk about his experiences around cyber, particularly as the boss on the Hunted programme, but also just really from his perspective, trying to change a little bit of the narrative beyond really just the pure technical aspects of cyber. Ben won't be taking any phone calls during his presentation, so please turn off your phones. That would be great. But without any further ado, over to Ben. Thank you very much.
Is this the point where I say I'm going to wear a red lanyard? Or just? You don't need to use that mic. I don't need to use that mic. Good. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Good afternoon. First of all, apologies for the cheesy slide. If it was me doing it, it would be crayon, so it's better someone else did it, but I do apologise for the cheesiness of it and the formality. Dan, thank you so much for the introduction. Working with Lancaster University last year and this year, I have to say I'm not just saying it because they invited me to talk and I work with them on these initiatives, but before I start, I just wanted to say, Lancaster University, in my opinion, are trailblazing in the way that we are looking to collaborate. Different agencies, whether that be government, whether that be private, a big part or a big gap that I see at the moment is that collaboration piece. We tend to stick in little bubbles for security reasons, for business reasons, intellectual property reasons, whatever that might be. But of course, therein lies the problem. The bubbles don't allow us to share, and I think Lancaster University is breaking the bubble. And forgive all the cheesy analogies here, by the way, but it works in my head. If I give an analogy, it works in my head. But yeah, so really, really proud to be working alongside these guys. A little bit about myself, just to leap on what Dan said there. I've been in the private industry for 10 years now. So my intelligence career is well behind me, and what I know about intelligence is completely outdated. So I'll be talking to you about the private industry which is a fascinating world to be in. It's very, very busy. You have to work hard for your money. Those in the private industry know that, of course. But my talk today, as Dan alluded to, will be much more on the human physical side of cybersecurity and not so much the technical side. Hopefully some of you will be relieved to hear that. And also, I can't talk about the technical side because I'm not technical. It would kill my brain. So let me go back a few slides. To fit in with the narrative about beyond cyber. When people think about cybersecurity, we think technical solutions, which is quite right. We should think about technical solutions. It's the bread and butter of cybersecurity. Of course it is. But we often ignore the human element. And I know people speak about humans being, humans being the people that are the most in errors in terms of statistics, which is correct. But we know that already. We know that. And we're trying to make technology more bearable for the human error. We know all that already. That's absolutely fine. But we still ignore the fact that the statistical analysis, I hate talking statistics, by the way, as well, because they're never truly correct. We don't know. The internet's anarchic, so we don't actually know statistics. But we do know that the common trend at the moment for hackers is the staff within inside organizations. You could have 20 ex-SAS Special Forces troopers at your front door. No one's getting in the building or out the building that shouldn't be there. That's no problem at all. We can do that. We can also source students and otherwise from Lancaster University. We can poach people that are the best in the business, the best technical brains in the business, to look at our technical security infrastructure. But it still doesn't help all of the people inside that organisation. What is new about that? Well, nothing really, apart from the fact there's never been a silver bullet solution, and there still isn't really, apart from the fact we don't talk about it enough because we tend to slope our shoulders as organisations. We slope our shoulders because it is a grey area that no one wants to deal with. As a security team or executives within a business, we don't want to come across as oppressive to our staff members. We don't want to tell them what to do with their Facebook and Twitter or X profiles because we don't want to be that organisation. Furthermore, legally, we probably can't tell them what to do in their private space unless you've signed the dotted line and you're doing work that tells you how to use your private social media. That's to the side. But in the most part, certainly in the private industry, workforces can't tell you how to use your digital life outside of that organisation. Again, statistics hate them. 75% of the workforces work remotely now. But even when we're in the office, we still have our own devices. We're still on social media. I think lockdown and COVID, the pandemic, I think that has a lot to answer for. And I think we're starting to see that, excuse the phraseology, bite us in the backside. Because we're all sat at home bored. We're inherently signing up to accounts. We're signing up to things online. Games we're downloading to our phones. We're giving our email addresses and passwords away at a rate we've never seen before, and that will keep increasing. So it's the people within the organizations that hackers are targeting because they know for a fact it is the lane of least resistance. We're looking at motivation. Mostly motivation's financial, sometimes the kudos. Mostly financial, sometimes both. But if we look at some big cases, as it says here, it always starts with digital reconnaissance. A hack doesn't just happen out of nowhere. Yes, there's automated attacks and it will just go for everyone, but if we're talking about targeted hacking, it doesn't just start from nowhere. It starts from digital reconnaissance. And you will be more of a target, or your organisation will be more of a target if there's more noise in the digital space with your staff members in that building, in your organisation, whatever that might be. What is it that puts the head above the parapet? Some organisations now encourage their staff members to create LinkedIn accounts and post on LinkedIn about their company. And whilst that's absolutely fine, you're making noise. One of the main targeted areas at the moment, or mostly targeted areas in organisations, is new joiners. I see I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm not saying avoid it. I'm definitely on LinkedIn. It's business, and in the private industry, you need it, risk and reward. But I perpetually see people posting about their new job, or even in their organisations, I've got promoted, or I'm so proud I've got this new job. And whilst that's absolutely fine, you're making a noise, and you are now a target for a hacker for social engineering, and that's what we'll talk about as we go through the presentation. MGM Resorts, the big hacks in Las Vegas, starts with OSINT, open source intelligence. It starts with reconnaissance. Who works at these organisations? Who are they? Who does what roles within the organisations? And they always have a map about who they're going to target and what avenue they're going to take to deliver the technical part, the breach. LastPass has been hacked a few times now. The main hack came from a developer's personal environment, not that of LastPass corporate environment. So it is the lane of least resistance. When we're talking about what hackers are really hacking, and as the introduction would allude to from Dan, taking the technicalities out of it, really a hacker is just hacking someone else's human brain, aren't they? Yes, there's technical severe around it, but someone has to pull the plug, so to speak, or press the button, or download the malware, or be socially engineered in the physical space and give away information either knowingly or unknowingly. It's a human tricking a human, if you boil all of the technical jargon, for want of a better word, out of the way. Ever since, as a young toddler, I've been really interested in human behaviour and what makes our brains tick. And this is where my narrative earlier about going back to the provenance of a hack. What is the start of a hack? It's about a human working out another human and how that human can be tricked. And going back to a toddler, my mum unfortunately was an alcoholic. She died when I was 4. But I remember even back then, I would read body language because I knew her body language on a certain day meant something. I didn't really understand it all at the time, but I knew a certain action or behaviour meant how my day would look. So even from that point, I really got interested in human behaviour. And we've all got egos, of course. Egos are our defence mechanism. It stops us doing things to get killed, basically. If you break it down, our egos stop us getting killed. That's what it thinks it's doing. So when someone says to you, do you want to come and jump out of a plane at the weekend, your instant reaction is absolutely bloody not. I don't want to do that, because your ego's kicking in. Your brain is saying absolutely don't do that because you're scared. It gives you that horrible feeling in your gut. I certainly wouldn't jump out of a plane, by the way. But that's what it is. And the more you put online, the more the hacker knows about you, the easier you are to trick. And it's as simple as that. And I'll give a case study in just a second. In fact, there's the second. That was come on swiftly. So before this talk, I thought what I'll do, I'll go online, I'll just do a bit of OSINT. And I've obviously obfuscated details. But by the way, this is all open source information. This isn't, I haven't got this through nefarious reasons. This is just going on open source and doing research. So I thought, right, I want to give a demonstration to maybe give proof to the pudding about what I'm talking about. And I went online, I thought, right, I'm going to search for a big energy company in the UK. So I found the CIO of a big energy company in the UK. And this is real, by the way. I've done this a couple of days ago. Because if I'm a hacker, I'll look at C-suite. Yep, naturally look at C-suite. But actually, I think there's another mistake there by individuals. It's not always C-suite that are targeted. People think it is, but it's actually, like I said, new joiners, HR, inherently clicking on CVs and invoices. But we'll go with a CIO because I thought that would be a bit more fun because he's a chief information officer and he knows a bit about cybersecurity. So I'll run through a few open source tools at the moment. So my business, the OSINT group, we deal with digital vulnerability assessment. So we use a load of different OSINT tools and databases. Some are paid for, some are free, some are expensive, some are really cheap. And I'll talk to you about that in just a second. But ultimately, very rarely do they check our business about the reasons for us using these tools or buying the subscriptions to them. So ultimately, they're available to the bad guys as well. So from a LinkedIn account, just a quick show of hands, who's got LinkedIn? I definitely have. Most people do. That's cool. So even when you go to your security settings and say, I don't want you to show my email addresses, tools such as this easily just scrape it and give you the email address and phone number anyway. It's for marketing. It's really easy. That tool's £19 a month, unlimited use. You can get phone numbers and emails for anyone on LinkedIn. We then put it through another deep web database here, and obviously I've obfuscated it, but we have the chap, where the chap lives. He also displayed that on his LinkedIn account, you can see bottom left. So then all we put in this database was name and location of where that person lives. And instantly we're given, I think it was about 16 emails, 4 phone numbers. One was which live, because we popped that in WhatsApp and it came up the profile picture. All of his social media sites and different locations, one of which was his live home address. Then to make things a bit more fun, we put it through another OSINT tool with just his email address now, which we've got from his LinkedIn account. We put the email address in and we click search. Easy as that. This database costs £30 a month for unlimited use. This is really not expensive stuff. So hackers sitting in bedrooms wherever they are around the world, this is not expensive stuff for them to buy for the amount of information you can get off the back of it. So when we're talking about digital footprints, the CIO of this large energy company has a huge digital footprint. He's used his personal email address to sign up to. You can see all of the accounts. By the way, this is just a sample. I couldn't fit them all on the page. But these are all of the accounts that are associated with his personal Gmail account. And that's then displayed here. This is all open source stuff as well. This is nothing intrusive whatsoever. This is not intrusive. It gives you a visual reference of all of his online accounts. 39 online accounts that we've attributed to the CIO of British Gas. So ultimately, all of these accounts, and we see it every single week, this is what hackers are doing. They're working out what accounts you've got, your likes, your dislikes. We work a lot in North America. They'll subscribe to ESPN or their favourite NFL team. So we've got a flavour of their sports teams they like. So you can already think about the social engineering opportunities that are available. In North America as well, there's a tool that we use. I'm going off piece slightly here, but beyond cyber, why not? There's a tool that we use where we can put a VRN or a license plate of a vehicle in, which we can find on a driveway on a Facebook post. And it tells us every time that person enters into a private ANPR car park. We just register it. We top it up with £20. It drives into the car park. We pay for it because we've already registered the vehicle. But ultimately, we just track that vehicle around. So you can already see the security implications of that. But 39 total accounts. So already within LinkedIn, a database to this database, probably 4 or 5 clicks. And we've got all of this information literally within minutes. So here's the interesting part as well. This is the last slide on this short case study, but it actually mimics one we did last year with an energy company in a different country. That's why I thought I'd use this as an example to see what we could find. But this was the beats that we took to essentially hack the CIO. They had done the technical pen test, great. They've done the physical pen test, great. No one's getting into their power grids or whatever. So they asked us to come in and check the digital footprints of the C-suite. So we just OSINT them and find as much information as we can and look at what part a hacker would go to as the lane of least resistance, or what is the most believable target or believable lane that we can socially engineer this person to do something they wouldn't otherwise ordinarily do. And it came by way of reviews. Has anyone ever left reviews online before? I have. If you leave reviews online and a hacker gets your email address, very quickly they can map out every single review that you've done. This is the CIO of the large energy company in the UK. At the point of doing this a few days ago, he was actually there. I want to use a phrase there, but I won't because there was a swear word in it. I won't lie to you. It was going to end in or not. But there was literally a review that he'd left 2 hours before doing the actual OSINT. So we knew exactly where he actually was. It was in somewhere near Norway. So he was at a seafood restaurant. So we knew where the person was. We're tracking the person with reviews. It's ridiculous. You think when you're tracking someone's physical location, you need correct warrantry and subpoenas and justification. But you could just do it for open source if you're lucky enough. It's really that easy. But this chap had left so many reviews. With the 2 hour one, for example, What we then did in the real life case, we basically just registered a domain that looked exactly like the domain that he'd left the review for the business. And it's done all the time. It's not difficult. It's not particularly crude. It's not particularly sophisticated. It's actually quite crude. We registered the domain. We emailed the chap and we said, thank you so much for your review. Reviews like this help small businesses like us, blah, blah, blah. You can imagine the email. Please find attached a 50% voucher for your next visit. We'd love to welcome you and your family again. We knew the family went because we found his wife's Instagram account, which was open, and she'd taken a lovely video of the roast dinner. We knew the kids were there. So we referenced these things, so it's believability. He did go to the restaurant. My family were there. I did eat a roast dinner, and I would love 50% off. So, of course, he clicked on the voucher. So my point here, I guess, is it doesn't matter really what experience you have or how alert you are to hackers and social engineering. Anyone really can be hacked if they've got the right information online to give the hacker an in to your brain and how your brain operates. And I love that phrase at the back here, time is what determines security. With enough time, nothing is unhackable, I think it says. Same as this was quite a quick process, but if someone was hell-bent on getting into an organization or a particular person, they just monitor this. They keep monitoring all that activity for a couple of weeks, building up maybe a bit of rapport on LinkedIn or something like that. It's actually quite scarily easy. And it all goes back to the beyond cyber, thinking about everything else out there, not just technical solutions. What is the provenance of the hack? And it's this stuff. It is this stuff. And thinking about the digital footprints that you and the staff members are putting out online every single day, willingly or unwillingly. You're signing up for accounts, you're sticking information out there, which we all know this, obviously it's sucking eggs. But most people in most organizations don't know that stuff. If they sign up to an account, they don't expect that to be breached and their passwords chucked online. They just don't know it's going to happen. They don't know, but leaving a review is going to be mapped out like this by a hacker and they're going to get an email. A quick recent business example. This is taking it away from big corporations to a large family. So part of our remit in our organisation, our business, is we look after family offices. So in the family office, in this one, for example, we look after 31 family members. At this point of the digital vulnerability assessments, we'd done 18, as you can see. But in the 18 family members we'd done, 8 were at high risk. That doesn't mean to say, that we found 8 active hacks. It means 8 people out of the 18 we've already done are highly likely to be hacked if a hacker targets them, based on the information that we found online about them, like reviews, breach data, popping all their favourite stuff online, their home address, their SSN, the National Public Database breach recently. We've gone back over these 18, by the way, and half of them are on that with their social security numbers. It's quite scary figures. But more worryingly, of course, it was the passwords identified. Yes, I know most breach passwords we find are historic, but out of the 25, there are actually about 6 that are still active across that family. So just a quick snapshot out of organisations into families. Dan, if I go over, please just shout at me and I'll stop, or Anna. Another quick case study, and I want to bring this to everyone's attention as well, because I don't think it's being spoken enough about, and we want to talk about things that aren't being spoken about, is insider threat. We work with also an Australian family office. The family own a very successful online gambling platform. So they are what you would phrase as new money. So they don't really know what to do with it, or how to organise it, or how to organise the family, or whatever. And given their business, it is high threat. You can imagine a lot of people, not very nice people, betting lots of big figures, losing their money. So the amount of threats that our clients get from people that have lost £100,000 saying, I'm going to turn up at your office with guns and machetes if you don't give the money back, it's literally daily. This is a daily occurrence. Anyway, there was a serious threat from a Turkish mobster group, I'll say it as it is. Really real mobster threat. This isn't just a gang of people, this is a big threat. And they'd said they would turn up to the office with weapons. Anyway, They brought us in to have a look at it in the threat picture. The client was going on holiday to a very obscure island around Australia, and he got a message to the hotel that he was staying at from the mobsters. So they were thinking, well, how the hell do they know we're here? So we said, right, well, there's a couple of ways. You know, what kit have you got on you? Are you posting online? You know, are you doing something silly like that? They weren't, of course. So really, when we looked at all of the possibilities, it really went back to insider threat. Someone inside the company has told the mobster group where he is, simple as that. So we worked with the organisation and we said, who are your new hires in the last 2 months? And one of them was a Turkish-speaking linguist who joined the organisation in Australia. So we thought, well, that's interesting. You know, when we're thinking about these similarities, that one perhaps wasn't just a coincidence, I think. So we started to look at this young lady, and our draw came from looking at her digital presence. So we've done exactly what I've just showed you with her. We identified her email address, we identified her number. It then gave us an obscure little village in Turkey, which then when we looked at the threats and the emails that came in from the threats and the numbers, came to another chap that also lived and was the same age bracket as this person that had been recruited into the company. So they'd recruited her to join the company to hack it from the inside out, essentially, and pass them information. Once she'd passed the recruitment process, she was then allowed access. She wasn't allowed lots of privileges at start, but she started to use Slack to reach out to the hackers, and that's how they were getting into the system. And also she was just overhearing and eavesdropping information about the C-suite. So that was just an interesting one, which was real and literally a couple of months ago. But then, I mean, it's a different conversation when we're talking about vetting. I think, in my opinion, again, I've been out 10 years, I haven't been vetted for many years, thank God. I don't have to tell them about my search history, which is always nice. But I've lost my train of thought now. I'm not thinking about my search history at the moment. So the vetting issues. I think, again, my personal opinion is maybe we're a bit archaic with vetting. Maybe going around people's houses and having a cup of tea and asking them about the people you're going to recruit, maybe that is slightly historic because the person's going to tell you what the person joining told them to tell them anyway. Not that I did that. Maybe more digital intelligence would be better. Digital reconnaissance would be better. Blackmail, a rising trend that we do not see spoken about. It's just not really spoken about, because if an organisation has someone inside that's been blackmailed, they're not going to go to the papers and say, I want to tell you about a person inside the company that's been blackmailed. But we as an organisation are seeing it massively because we're going in to help them out. When it's reported, it's not always reported. Most blackmail that's going on is still going on because the person being blackmailed hasn't said or doesn't say or leaves the organisation, and no one ever knows. A quick example of one of the tools we use amongst many. You can see we work a lot with many Australian banks. We spend quite a lot of time in Australia. I do the Australian version of Hunted now in January and February because it's summer. I live in Spain, so I then chase the sun there. So rarely am I in the grey, as much as it's lovely to be here. 260, just using the ANZ, Australia New Zealand Bank, anz.com.au domain, 260 breaches. But you can see, if we start to unpick every single one, we've got some interesting ones here. We've obviously obfuscated details of the person, but it's addressing the elephant in the room. Yes, this was on a corporate domain, more likely to be on personal email addresses, but we can find personal email addresses, probably easier, LinkedIn and otherwise. But blackmail through that digital reconnaissance is massive. It's happening statistically a lot. The chances are in your organisation it's happening, we just don't know about it. That would be easy, wouldn't it? I've now got the password and the credentials to get into the account, lock the person out, go through all of their direct messages and conversations, and that's the start of the blackmail piece. To summarise, because I've got a couple of minutes left, hackers start with you. I won't read this verbatim, but like we said, it doesn't just come out of thin air. If you're making a noise, either as a person or a business, you are ultimately raising the stakes for hackers to look at you and go, right, there we go, that might be some low-hanging fruit. Social engineering exploits everyone. Hopefully I proved that in a case study of a CIO of a large energy company, and this is literally now. So we can say that we teach, and we've got really great institutions. I'm not sure it's called it anymore, but CPNI. You know, we're doing all this great initiatives nationwide, but we're still not addressing that bit in the middle, which is the people that work there, because we've just proven that that is the case. This person could be ultimately hacked based on their digital footprint. The hidden weak spot. Businesses are reluctant to address this because it's the grey area, and it means someone's got to do a lot of work. I'm not saying people would shy away from the work, but it's horrible work in so much as you might come across as an oppressive organisation, you might upset the apple cart, and staff might soon start to get a bit peed off. But it's an area that we can't ignore any longer. And the rising blackmail threat. Through tools such as this, which is just a very, very small drop in the ocean, actually, if we're looking at large organisations, small organisations, medium size, there are people within every single business that can be blackmailed. So if a hacker targets a business for whatever reason, there will be, undoubtedly, 99% chance that someone in there can be exploited, and that information is sent out. So I think we're just bang on time, Anna, are we? Thank you very much for listening, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ben. So it's time for your inquisition. Yeah, you can go sit wherever you like. So Ruby and Samina would like to come and join us. That's one. Right, yeah. So, we managed to get up onto the chairs.
Yeah, managed to.
So that was fantastic. Thank you very much. Really, really insightful. I'm glad you didn't use me as your case study. That was very kind of you. So would either of you like to kick us off with the first awkward question?
Yeah, sure. Happy
But
to.
by the way, do they have to be awkward?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
I think we had a strict brief that they have to be as awkward as possible. I think there was so much there. Thank you for that. One thing that was really interesting to me was the family office piece.
Yeah.
So before. Sorry, did we need to do intros as well?
Oh yeah, sorry. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So hi, for everyone who doesn't know me, I'm Ruby Montaboy. So I work at Plexel. I'm an innovation lead, specialising in national security.
Hi, I'm Samina Khan. I work for Info Group and I'm the Director for Partnerships and Community.
All right, everybody knows who I am.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Formalities out the way. So before Plexel, I did a little bit of OSINT work, definitely not on the scale that you did. And I was working for family offices, so similar thing in terms of understanding their digital footprint and vulnerabilities. And I think what was interesting was that there was definitely a point where there was not enough data. Mm-hmm. And then as people started signing up to all of these services and social media exploded, it was a great time to be an OSINT. It felt very easy. But that was still a few years ago now. Do you find that there's so much online now? Is it harder to separate the signal from the noise, or would you say OSINT's actually in a strong position now?
It's a great question. I think the latter. I think OSINT's still in a strong position, and I don't want to say always will be, but will be for the foreseeable future. You're right. The amount of information online, or the amount of opportunities for people to sign up to things online, is never going to go away. That's just the digital age that we live in. We're no longer in the industrial age. Information is money these days. So OSINT is information. Therefore, as an aside, it will always be a great business. But in the terms of addressing keeping people safe, and to answer the question about trying to find the noise in between the stuff that actually isn't relevant, I think that, for us as a business, is the hardest part of the business, is to educate people why it's so dangerous for them to do stuff online. Because our culture is to go online and build your business. Our culture, we're told to build and innovate and have more tech. But the more tech, the more online profiles, therefore the more threat vectors. So I think that to sort of as a side note, where we find it difficult, and I was speaking to Dan earlier, because our business is only 2 years old, so we're new into it. We think we're really good at what we do, which is great, but I don't know how to market, I don't know how to sell things. So we're slowly working it out, as any new business does, but still the main point is, and I think for everyone, not just the business, is the education piece, as telling people why it's so important to make them really necessary security changes.
Mine's a little bit off-piste.
Good.
So, given like the current kind of riots and unrest
Yeah.
that we've seen in the last few weeks, and having said what you said around there not being a silver bullet, in how organisations can tackle, the challenges around with the workforce, what would your advice be to government in how to tackle misinformation, disinformation? How would they go about it?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably a question everyone's trying to ask, isn't it? Because you're either one side of the fence or the other. You're either the side of the fence that thinks social media gives the truth, or you're the side of the fence that thinks social media is part of the problem in the unrest that we're seeing at the moment. It's irrelevant which side of the fence you're on, but the fact is a lot of people think it. Aside from X or Twitter, most social media companies will comply with government legislation. They'll sit down, they'll talk, whereas X is a different beast at the moment. I don't know how to answer with X because I think that's a standalone entity in so much as they're going to do what they're going to do and they have the financing behind it. But with others, perhaps it's continuing the conversations, not through censorship, by the way, it's continuing the conversations around, does the government provide more resources in terms of people and money to scour through social media and perhaps look to advise the ill-intended posts and do more of that. We saw, again, whether you agree or not, I won't tell you which side of the fence I'm on. In COVID, if someone mentioned the word COVID, they'll be all across it straight away and giving a narrative at the bottom. So maybe that's something that could be looked at, not in an oppressive way, but more resources to tackle what is clearly an ill-intended post to rile up frustration, social unrest or whatever. Again, I'll take X out of the equation on that one.
Just wanted to know what your opinion is.
Really, really interesting points. I mean, when you talk about people putting information online, everybody, you said everybody wants it. The companies benefit from having that information, and yet the wider population is a sort of uneducated consumer of those services, and that feeds a lot of this stuff. So how do we educate the wider population, the group of people in the room we've reached out to, but how do we actually then go out and say, actually should be doing that? I mean, my kids hate me because I just don't let them have social media, right?
Yeah.
One, because they're old enough. Yeah, no. I also lock down their phones as well. They really hate me. So the challenge is how do we get that message out, particularly when we've got children whose parents do let them have social media accounts at 8 or younger, in breach of that. In terms of open source intelligence, they're stacking up a whole load of information that can be used later on. So how do we get that information out to a wider population, do you think?
Yeah, great point. And I want to know the statistic, but I heard a statistic which was quite damning. Most children who are unborn, or like 20 or 30% of children that are unborn, are online already. With the pictures are posted from mum's belly and whatnot, which is quite scary, isn't it? Really, whatever. Aside to that, but I think this comes from an adult perspective. So, like you said, Dan, mums and dads. I think that's where the core value of online usage starts, in the family unit. And one question I often get asked is similar question, right? You've told us all this and digital footprints and how scary it is, and the more you post, the more you can be hacked, etc. What the hell do we do about it? And I come back to that. It's the family unit. And I even say, on a Friday, whatever part of the week you'll sit down and have dinner, have a little family audit, get a notepad out and see what you've got online, see what you can take off, and just have a conversation around it. And I do think society as we know it, it needs to be really onto the onus is on the parents, and of course you get the generational shift after that. We've got a bit of catching up to do, of course we have. But I also think with the social media companies, and I know they always get a bashing for it, mine's a slight bashing or a slight tweak, but when they sign up, what's the process of confirming your age? What do they do when you sign up about education? They give you the flick through about how to use the platform, but maybe a small insight into what could be the dangers of using that. But yeah, my ultimate answer would be family units and taking the responsibility on that, getting the message out to them. Perhaps that is at government level, adverts, social media, whatever that might be, to get the message out.
Yeah, digital equivalent of the Green Cross Code.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, sure. So I think not to make it all about Hunted, because I know you've had a massive career doing other things as well. But my favourite thing on Hunted is when you've got someone who's obviously watched the earlier seasons, and so they figure they've got the game sort of figured out. They know that your family members, your loved ones are the weakest link. They sort of remove them from social media, and then that's what you use. Yep. You use the absence of those connections to find them. And that sort of got me thinking about the blackmail issue and it's not the crime, it's the cover up. Do you have advice for organisations in terms of if there's too much online already, is it better to just be more careful going forward? Is it better to try and remove those things from online?
Yeah, I think it depends on what role that person's going into. If they're going into a sensitive role, yeah, you're right in so much as the deletion, and it creates more attention than actually maybe just leaving things as the status quo. So that would be a fine balance of risk and reward. I think ultimately setting all the correct security protocols and having good email management, obfuscating emails, going forward, MFA, all that easy stuff to implement, not that everyone bloody does it, but the easy stuff to do is an essential one. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And to answer the question about the people that have already done it, just like any law enforcement or intelligence agency, we just have to think of other ways of doing it that they haven't quite seen yet, so we do it that way. But yeah, I think it depends on the person, the role, and whether you leave it status quo or do a clean-up. There's things you can clean up which won't leave a trace, which is great, and that can be done. But yeah, I like your point, and it's a valid one.
You took my question about, I was going to ask a similar question about children, so sorry, I don't have another question.
So I was going to then sort of follow up with the moral aspect about businesses consuming all of this data for their profit, and just sort of get your opinion on their moral obligation. You touched on what they could do, but their moral obligation of doing more to protect the individuals on their platform against the types of things that you can do and are available for £30 a month.
Yep. Regardless of the price, £30 a month versus some of them a few grand, there needs to be a due diligence process. And the more expensive one, just to give you an idea, the more expensive tools that we use, maybe you could say more intrusive, but it's still open source data, it's harvesting. They will jump on the phone with you and ask you about the business. What are you using it for? But bearing in mind, when we started our business, some of these tools we didn't get until about a year, but it's very easy to register a business, have it for a year, and then pick the phone up and speak to someone. So even still, it's not the best due diligence process. The argument on the flip side is that they are selling the subscriptions they are selling it to law enforcement, they are selling it to fraud investigators. So for the greater good, they're doing a good thing. So I think that's their public-facing nature. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There needs to be something a bit more weighty, which determines the use of these tools. What the answer is, I don't know. That would be up to them. But again, without bashing the government, there needs to be more governance on that. So what are you doing? What is your process? Who have you currently got? What have you done? And a bit more spotlight on how they're doing it. Exactly, it's the action, when it gets into law, it's the action they do with it if it's unlawful. But you're absolutely right, rewinding, there's not. And that's, I guess, the whole point of the talk today, was to talk about the bit before that entry into the company, whether that's the phishing link or the malware or whatever that might be. What happens here? And I think we can all just agree and accept that these tools will always be available, even if they're shut down or closed down through non-profit or not, been very successful. Someone will come and take their place. So these tools will always be available. Whether they are doing due diligence or not is irrelevant. We just need to expect it to always be available and learn about that initial stage, which goes back to digital footprints.
So I'm thinking, I'm trying to bring it out of the gloom a little bit, as we tend to do in cyber. And we've got a lot of people in the room here, sort of in the Northwest, in Greater Manchester, thinking about sort of the future of skills around these areas, like beyond cyber. And I was thinking about what makes a great open source sort of intelligence or analyst. Yep. And so when I was working in that space, there was a lot of ex-servicemen, neurodivergent guys in hoodies, like, you know, you can kind of got the cliche there. But some of the, just in my experience, some of the most effective people I had was someone where, you know, sort of a young lady, like in her early 20s, who's broken up with a long-time partner, and that person started dating someone. And you give them 10 minutes on Instagram and they will find everything about that, you know, and like that's an OSINT analyst that I can use, you know. And so I'd be really interested, like, as you're building up your company and you're starting to scale, like, what kind of people are you looking for?
I love that question. And I love it because there's 3 partners in the business. Our youngest partner is 20. When we partnered, he was 19. He is by far, I'm unfortunately 41 now, but he's by far the best OSINT practitioner out of all 3 of us and our partners that work for us at the moment. And the reason for that, I think it's passion. He's absolutely passionate about it. Second to that, I just think you have to have a nosy, investigative mindset, because what we always see when we teach our OSINT courses, you'll get the people that can find 1,000 bits of information within 5 minutes, and that's brilliant. You think, oh great, you found all this lovely stuff, but they don't know what to do with it. That's not the point of OSINT. The point is to find it, assimilate it, and actually make it something functional. And it's that bit which people don't often think about. So they're great at finding stuff and snooping around and finding the cheating partners, but what do you do with it at the end? But it's the inquisitiveness, and it's just mainly like cyber as a whole. You just got to be curious and find workarounds for everything. But yeah, I love it. And actually we find a lot of the younger people are much, much better.
I don't actually have any honest with you.
So a bit of thinking about the example, the case study you gave around the CIO.
Yeah.
And obviously at Lancaster, we've got our cyber executive MBA. We try and work with leaders and develop leaders. I'm guessing, you know, what would your advice be to kind of leaders of organisations to create that kind of culture of protection and wariness, or, you know, to try and drive forward positive change in the organisation around this kind of open source intelligence?
I think what you guys are doing, again, I'm not just saying it because I'm here, but what you guys are doing already in joining different departments, different organisations, through that academic, through that government, through that private, that's a massive part, and that's got to be done in isolation in every single business as well. I take the adult analogy. When you join a company, there needs to be that adult parent conversation with people, not in a patronising way, but as a new joiner through the HR process, or whatever that process is in onboarding people in an organisation. That's when the conversations need to start happening. I know lots of people always say, oh, you know, training's one thing, but no one really listens. Yes, I get it. Some people might walk away and just remember 20% of something they've done online, or a annual refresher. But it's just about making it a bit more interesting. And I think if someone joins an organisation, you can give an example of someone that joined 2 years ago, not giving names or personal data, and giving a real life example about what they did and what that meant to the company in terms of a breach or whatever that might be. And I think just having interesting conversations in a non-patronising way, making it quite cool and quirky, and just taking responsibility, I think is the way to do it.
So this is just a question purely for my own, like, you know, security. And I think since we got an expert in the room, I have to do a bit of travel for work, and, you know, I'm hearing a lot around sort of data block USB chargers to use in the airport and things like that. Do you think the balance of where people should be focusing is kit like that, or is it probably more common sense, or is it both?
Well, actually, not many people would know that you can charge and send malware through charging cables now, but the general population wouldn't know that. So I do think there needs to be more awareness around that.
I'm very paranoid.
You are, obviously, in your field, yeah, you would know more about the delivery of the technical stuff than I would, but I know filming the show in Australia, for example, our cyber team, the technical guys, I call them the brains department, they have some kit that I wouldn't probably think twice about using. If it was in a public area, I would maybe plug it in. I know it sounds really bad, but that's just the nature of the world we live in, and the inventiveness of cyber equipment and the means of hacking is exponentially rising, and so is the education around it as well. But yeah, I think to the latter, I think more awareness needs to be made around that kind of stuff. Again, I don't know how that would happen. Maybe in public areas, be careful. I don't know, something like that. But you're right, most people don't actually know about that. You're paranoid because you do know about it. So just don't travel, don't go on holiday, just stay here.
I mean, the travelling aspect, just in the UK aspect, is interesting because of the general sort of unawareness of issues, even just like accessing Wi-Fi access points in coffee shops. I'm certainly never going to be leaving restaurant reviews anymore. Just so, but again, like I don't think people necessarily understand the different vectors at which people can be reached, like the leaving reviews or like using free Wi-Fi, but the technology sort of is not there to kind of support them. It's all about making it easy and accessible. So I'm just wondering about your views in terms of like the technology provider's perspective. Have they got the balance right around making it usable and accessible, like easy to sign up, against the protective nature of how they look after that data and how they look after that individual for the lifetime that they're working with them?
Yeah, I like the question because it instantly came to mind about MAC addresses and signing into networks wherever you go. And I think I actually done on the last time I was with you guys, I actually done a demonstration about MAC addresses and turn your hotspot on and what that might mean in the data you're leaking out. So even you think you're being more secure because you're not using the Wi-Fi, you're going your hotspot, you're actually then leaking your MAC address, which is then geotagged onto a database and pinning you to a map. Potentially, it's not a open source anyway. It's not a great way, but there's a way it can happen. But to answer your question, I don't think they've got it right, and the answer to that is I don't know how they're going to address that. I really don't know how they're going to go from a consumer from the start to the finish. Looking back historically, when we're talking about selling you equipment, so iPhones or whatever phone, everything was turned on, and then you had to opt out, like geolocation services. Now that's stopped. And when you buy a phone, everything's switched off. You have to opt in. So I think initiatives like that are good, but it needs to happen more widely. With logging into Wi-Fi hotspots, I think that's something only now most people know about. Only now, and this has been happening for years. So what's the next attack vector or next vulnerability? Because we know in 10 years. Only then most people will know about it. So again, I don't know what the silver bullet is, but it needs to be more communication. What that communication is, I don't know, but it needs to happen quite quickly.
Right, so I hope you've got your thinking caps on in terms of questions, because it's kind of over to you guys. So hopefully you've got some questions, otherwise it's going to be a very short session. You might all just want to go and get some food. So has anybody got any questions? Good, that's all I see. I'll come over, hold on.
Hi, Phil Swan from Great Manchester Combined Authority. So you talked sort of about trends in this space and how it's accelerating. What do you see happening really over the next maybe 5 or 10 years? How bad do you think this is going to get? And we've got new legislation that was announced in the King's speech. Is it going to go far enough, or do you think there'll be a tipping point and suddenly we'll be in a situation where something more drastic will happen?
I think I might have touched upon it. Hi, by the way, thank you for the question. I think I might have touched upon it in the talk on societal change. I think that will be the issue. King's speech, politicians, talks, legislation, whatever, it doesn't matter and it won't affect the societal change. And we spoke about it earlier actually about the unrest in the country. Again, that to one side, society is inherently changing. I think people are less scared of repercussions from a judicial point of view. prison sentences or otherwise, or lack of. So I think that is changing society moving forward. And in essence, it's making more people available to do nefarious activity, either online or physically. So I do think, unfortunately, we are yet to see the worst of it. I do think the trend of criminality will keep growing. Like I said, these tools will always be available. More people are going to use more things online. So without sounding like it's a really bad, horrible future, the future doesn't look great in terms of statistics and the rise of online crime. However, I do think there's a way to balance it and negate that threat spiraling out of control. And that is through universities, Lancaster and otherwise. I went northern now, I said Lancaster. It's rubbing off. It's Lancaster. But yeah, I think, it's not looking good, but it's not too late to try and dampen that rise. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Dan Knowles. I've got a company called Northern Reach. I just want to say, first of all, by the way, using a combination of Facebook and TikTok, my wife can tell you pretty quickly who's having an affair with who else. So if you've got any jobs,
I was going to say,
you're on a job. But no, Mike, it's a little bit off track, this question actually. But I just found it really fascinating, kind of. I think particularly some of the really extreme stuff that you and your team must be exposed to as you're out doing this work. And congratulations, you're protecting so many people doing this sort of work. So I think it's wonderful. You mentioned that you've got kind of like young people that work with you. How do you kind of help those people, yourselves perhaps, manage the sort of impact of being privy to some of this stuff? It's really difficult stuff. How do you help your team? How do you do that?
Yeah, thanks for the question, mate. I think what we've tried to find, the senior partners in the company, when new people join, younger people, we almost try and act as a mentor and talk about experiences that we've been through before. I mean, a lot of stuff that they see is on the digital side, not so much the physical investigations. That's the FBI fugitive recall was an anomaly, I guess. We don't normally do that stuff. We just happen to live 3 hours away. And with our backgrounds, we thought, why not pack a bag and a toothbrush, and off we went. But yeah, acting as a mentor to new people coming in organisations, like any good organisation would do, and just talking about experiences, talking through things, not, without sounding like David Brent, don't come across as a boss first, and almost, just be a shoulder to speak to, or a head to speak to, and just mentor the person in a way that your big brother or big sister would. And I think that has helped us no end. But like I said earlier in this chat here, that actually the younger ones probably tell us what to do most of the time anyway. So they're telling us and guiding us most of the time. So that's why we have so many people, young people working in our organisation. It's great.
Hi Ben, thanks so much for your presentation. I'm Saj from Plexel. I found it really interesting, this concept that you made about seemingly the convergence of information operations and cyber operations. So you're effectively saying like the information piece potentially is upstream of the cyber incident that might occur downstream, which historically feels like it was more of a nation state type approach, but it's been adopted by criminal groups and people who want to obviously affect individuals. I guess the question I had was about OSINT as this market that's emerging, practitioners such as yourself and others who provide this as a service. Who is the customer in the enterprise for that service? Because historically, security was always stovepiped. Like it's just people, you only have the security function that focus on the security aspect of that problem, but they don't necessarily consider the information operation as well.
Correct. Yeah, really great question. Thank you very much. We mentioned earlier again about education. So the main piece for us, or the main difficulty I would say, not just for the financial gain of the business, but actually explaining the benefits of the digital information as well as the physical side. an example, we work or we're part of a community close protection world, and they look after high net worth individuals, which goes back to the family office. So when we work with a family office in the digital security, we say, not as an upsell, but we say, let's speak to your physical security team, because they seldom even consider the digital breadcrumbs their clients are leaving around. For example, they might post they're going to France in 2 days' time. Obviously the physical team don't know about this, or someone might have already said something online about them going to an event like this. It might have been posted ahead of time. So we can say to the physical team, be aware, people do know that your principal's going, and you know the rest. It's sort of common sense. But yeah, normally the entry point is us discussing and educating about the benefits of the digital side. I think we're still in that space. I don't think organisations would naturally go, oh, we better look at OSINT and speak to, they just don't naturally think about that. You think OSINT is just a nice to have, not a necessity, whereas we're trying to breed the culture. Yes, obviously it's good for business, but actually in everyone's sense, it makes complete sense that OSINT is a necessity now, not just a nice to have tool that you can call upon for a bit of investigation for HR, for a rogue employee. It's just not like that anymore. The benefits of it are massive. So yeah, I hope that answered the question. But yeah, my answer would be the education piece. That's our entry. And if they get it, we get the business. If they don't, we don't, until something happens, and then we're reactive. And then they'll listen.
Hi, I'm Andrew from the UK government. Ben, thank you for your presentation. I feel like Keir Starmer's speech yesterday was enough to make me jump out the window, but you've definitely sort of pushed me off Peachy Head, I think. So you've managed to demonstrate, I think, that no matter how much we train people in security, that you're still going to find a way to hack them. And you've also told us that you don't think changing the law or the cyber resilience bill or whatever it might be is actually going to make a difference at the end of the day. I mean, I'm slightly upset that LinkedIn are leaking away my personal email address, despite me making settings to say that they shouldn't, and that somebody can still get it for £20 a month. Do you think liability really ought to lie with that kind of institution? And rather than sort of trying to put new penalties on the citizens, shouldn't the government be putting significant penalties on organisations like LinkedIn if that really is possible?
Easiest question yet, yes. Lovely to meet you. Sorry for making you go to Beachy Head, I do apologise. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's pretty much the only option here, because these, like I said, these tools are getting this legally, they're getting the APIs, they're paying LinkedIn to get the APIs, to get that information. So this is a process that's obviously legal at the moment, otherwise it wouldn't be there. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And once again, it's because people don't really, or the masses don't really know about OSINT and what's available to us as the good guys, thankfully, and what we can get in terms of keeping our clients safe and what the bad guys can get. I think if there's a true understanding at government level about what is actually available through open source research, not even being intrusive, not logging into people's accounts, doing nothing illegal whatsoever, what is actually available through these tools, then I think more serious conversations would happen, to your point about going to providers and saying, look, this can't continue, because what we're seeing here is lots of routes towards organisations for hacking or whatever nefarious reasons there is. So yes is the answer, absolutely. I think at this stage, that's the only answer I can see to make things better.
Very much.
Hi Ben, Richard from Northrop Grumman. Great presentation, thank you. Thank you. I was at a parental school presentation for one of my son, a few years back, and it was a retired police officer who'd set up a cybersecurity, cyber awareness, and he came in to give a talk, and his advice to all the parents was to ban social media from all the kids. And at the end of it, one of the questions was, I kind of challenged it and said, do you not think we should be educating parents, because we're not going to stop kids going on social media? Yeah. And not everyone's got your technical skills to be able to make that possible, but so the average Joe hasn't. So, and being as kids are learning from a very young age nowadays about cyber and the skills that they're developing are very much young age. How would you advise to introduce children into the world of technology, and what would that kind of pathway look like? Would you ban social media to a certain age, or would you say, actually no, it's well, what would your advice be?
Hello, thank you very much for the question. I like that a lot. I do think, to answer the first one, I do think there would be an age. I do think there's a reasonable age. I don't know what that might be. There'd be better experts to answer that question than I would about cognitive behaviour at young age. So I do think there should be a limit of an age, but I disagree that we should ban all kids from social media at all times until that certain point of age. I get that. But it's that whole argument, like I'm going to go right off here and use an analogy about drug use. We can keep arresting drug dealers. Drugs will always be here. Drugs will always be here. We just arrest people, people take their positions. It's exactly the same as social media. You can take people off social media, but lots of other people use it. It's here to stay. It will never go away. So a different approach needs to be had. My approach would be, I think we agree, it needs to be more of a, let's do more of it in a more proportionate and structured way. And that, whether that goes through primary schools or your finishing of primary into secondary, which I would suggest probably statistically is when most children really chomp at the bit of the parents to get on it, because that's maybe the way most of them communicate about what they're wearing on non-school uniforms, whatever. But there needs to be much more of it to make it more manageable, because just banning it is not going to work like drugs. It's not going to work, in my opinion.
Hi there, Darren at Barclays. So I want to pick up something you said right at the start of the talk, which is the word collaboration. So one of the things that the banks are pretty good at in the UK, don't know about Australia, is collaborating. So cybersecurity threats, we share information. Don't just talk about commercial products, but cybersecurity threats we talk about. Have you got any ideas or thoughts about what we could do differently or more around collaboration in the UK to share information across organisations, or does it all fall to NCSC group to manage and collaborate amongst us? I'm not sure. It's a difficult question, but just it feels like collaboration could be a great strength if we could do it better.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, mate. It's great they're all collaborating already. I didn't know that. I haven't lived in the UK for 7 years now, so I'm a bit outdated with the processes here. However, that's awesome. I think events like this, where we're using the university as an example here, bringing different cohorts together, that would be great for the banks, but maybe do it in other countries as well, with different countries' banking systems, because what you're going to see in the UK will be inherently different to what the fraud and activities happening in Eastern Europe. And ultimately, these frauds and trends are transient and they will move. So what you're seeing now, and you might negate the threat, you might collaborate and everything's rosy. In 6 months, what's happening in Hungary might hit the UK. But because you haven't spoken to the Hungarians about it, you don't know about it. For example, we worked with a big insurance company in the UK a few years back, and they understood OSINT, they understood the benefits. Sorry to stick my arm in front of you there. They understood the benefits and the proactive nature of negating issues before it is a problem and ultimately cost millions of pounds. And as one example, we monitored the dark web and we found there's fraudsters crowdsourcing information about the insurance companies they're going to hit next. They're even sharing documents and email addresses of the people that they spoke to in the insurance company. So we say, hey guys, they're talking about you in the dark web, this is the content. They made a slight tweak in their T's and C's of when you take out your policy, and that negated millions of pounds being lost. So the proactive nature of it. So going back to the point is, great in the UK, but if it's not happening already, it might be doing that on a global scale to get other trends that are happening elsewhere. I think that would be a great way to upskill what you're already doing. And you might get to travel somewhere else. Lovely. So.
Oh yeah. If we're all coming thick and fast now.
Hi Ben. A slightly controversial one from me and slightly tongue-in-cheek as well. Really interesting talk, thanks. How long will it be until OSINT and AI can replace our intelligence agencies?
Never. I genuinely think you always need the human curation of information. Your technical infrastructure and the amount of money you spend on technical third-party infrastructures and databases and systems are only as good as the person sat at the end of it analysing the data coming out. I know it's an easy answer to give you, but I don't think we're going to get away from that. But who knows, in 10 years, AI might be something even none of us in the room can even comprehend. And we're at that stage now, if we look back 10 years, aren't we really? So although I think that at the moment, I might be proven wrong in a couple of 3 years, I don't know.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier the example where like a Turkish employee led you to the Turkish mob, and that's how you solved that challenge. Where do you use shortcuts and use biases and use stereotypes in your role, and where do you challenge those to do something differently? Because it's like it feels like there might be a balance where you might say, well, you know, this is going to lead us like an easy route to a target versus where you might go a longer route.
From that example, I guess there wasn't bias. It was just putting two and two together. Same location, same age, same country. We've got this issue, and it was just an investigative beat to get to the answer. Difficult question to answer, I think, but in any event, whatever we do, we always try to apply proportionality. So, we all get the groupthink mentality, of course we do. We've got to put that to one side to have a real clear and concise, proportionate investigation. An objective one as well, because everything we do might end up in a court of law through litigation, so we have to do things properly. We have to properly log all of our investigations, where we found stuff, when we found it, all of that. So we have to do all that absolutely to a T. And the way we get around any biases through investigations is just going through the QC process like any organisation would do. But what we say in our particular business is, I'm going to give you this report and investigation. I don't want you just to check my typos, but I want you to tell me where I've gone wrong. So we're literally giving it to our fellow employee and saying, tell me why I've got that wrong, and they'll try and pick holes in it. And that's a way we get around it, not just look at the glossy pictures and graphs and typos, giving it to you to tell me why it's wrong. And also, please correct my spelling as well.
Hi, Ben. Similar, my question is around the same theme around insider threats. By the way, Hassan Raza from Lancaster University. Insider threat is actually an area that I'm really interested in. In my previous role, when I used to work in industry, I spent a lot of time trying to understand how can we detect these kind of problems within our organization. But from an academic perspective, what kind of contributions can we at Lancaster University bring into the wider cybersecurity practice community in insider threat? What are some of those dimensions that have yet to be explored in research that we could actually bring in and help industry?
Hey Hassan, thanks for the question. I'll leave the technical side of it for 1 second, because already you're going to have your technical system set up. So it's already looking and analysing any unusual behaviour in and out of the network. We're looking at people turning their hotspots inside a business to try and get business information out. We're doing all that already from a technical perspective. So I don't think we're doing anything wrong there from an education piece. That's already set technically. My advice in that would be looking at the human element of it as well, because you could have all the technical infrastructure set and it's all good, but you're not picking up on the insider threat. That's because they're doing something outside of the technical realm. So it's not a technical solution. It's about understanding the human behavior as well. It's about educating leaders within sections or executives or whoever runs that team or department and teaching them about human behaviors. Clicking onto the little nuances in someone's brain. Like I said before, when I went back to a toddler, I could pick out these little micro expressions. I'm not saying we go to that extent, but picking out unusual activity in someone's day-to-day activities, whether they are turning up late on a certain day every day or leaving early for lunch on a certain day every day. And again, it doesn't mean to say they're an insider threat, but if you get all of these consistencies, then that's something, it's a red flag that we can then look into and maybe do a small proportionate bit of OSINT to see what's happening with this person outside in their private life. Again, not intrusive, keeping it completely legal, but I think it's a human side of things that would ultimately help moving forward the insider threat. I think that would be the answer going forward, because I think technically we've probably got everything we need at this stage, although things will of course advance. But yeah, teaching that human element and understanding unnatural behaviour in staff and employees in the business?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I had some conversations with the Crest folks. So Lancaster also has a Centre for Research and Evidence in Security Threats. It's a UKIC-funded, publicly avowed research centre in security behaviours. The conversation around insider threats that I was having with them was, how do we actually turn the understanding of somebody being an insider threat into an opportunity? Because when you think about businesses, the staff are the most expensive part, and you don't really want to lose them. So if somebody's becoming an insider, it's probably because they're, well, it might be planted, but they're probably becoming disenfranchised from the organisation. You don't want to lose them, so you can use the kind of same insider threat detection techniques to go, actually, what's going wrong with Jane? What's going wrong with Bob? And you can have almost like use it as a duty of care, because you don't want to lose them, because you spent years training them up and getting them into the.
It's almost nipping it in the bud before it gets to that point.
Because you know, because by the time somebody's become an insider threat, you know, you've lost them in the organisation, and that's a massive blow, not just because of what they do, but because of that lost asset within the organisation. So, just thinking about, you know, and again, that's part of the conversation. How do we turn this into a plus? How do we use these types of things and think about how we can actually have benefit from them? So, you know, using this type of stuff, so actually something's going wrong here. How can we make that better? Are there any other questions? Yes.
Hi, Martin from the UK Government. I was struck, Ben, by what you were saying about you know, applying proportionality and you know, making sure that you're legal. And you know, when I look at some of the other folks doing OSINT in all sorts of ways, you know, some of them look very professional, some of them look a bit less professional. But I'd be really interested in your view about kind of the standards of ethics and professionalism across folks who do similar work to you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. For us, I think our experience is regional in terms of proportionality, to answer that question first. In the UK, it's very structured in what you can do and your parameters in which you can explore. When I left government work, I joined a private organisation which was a legal firm, so there was lots of open source work to do. And for example, we couldn't even friend someone on Facebook to look inside. We just had to be on the peripheries. Now, if I plant myself working for my North American clients, I can go a lot further, because the law in North America is completely different. California to one side, I think they're trailblazing in personal data security and personal privacy. But yeah, for us it's regional in terms of proportionality and what you can do and your parameters. The professionalism side, I think that just comes down to individuals. You meet lots of OSINT practitioners along the way. I'm sure you meet lots of cybersecurity practitioners. Some are better than others. I've had some really bad experiences, some really good experiences, but ultimately as a business, what we always do ourselves is, number one, if someone comes on board, it is about proportionality and knowing the boundaries of what you can do. Because one mistake, if it goes through litigation and we get the very clever defence barrister paid lots of money to be a professional arguer and pick a hole in our investigation, the business has folded. So one, ethically, we're going to be on the right side, but number two, it's absolutely crucial. But I've certainly come across a lot of people that don't perhaps mould to the boundaries at all, even so much as phone tracing and whatnot. And that's the point we completely disengage with these people and report if need to. I hope that answered the question. But yeah, for me, I think the overarching is regional, is where we see the massive differences.
Hi there, I'm Andrew from Plexel.
Hey.
I'm really interested as an employer as to how you deploy what you sell to clients within your own organisation. How do you work with your employees in order to manage their health, if that's the case, and then what interventions you make when you spot something that's going wrong?
So we discussed earlier actually about the QC process. So we would always buddy up with someone that comes into our organisation and literally sit on their shoulders as they go through the investigation to start. When they're off and running, we're still dipping in and out and looking at certain parts of a OSINT investigation. So we wouldn't say there's an investigation, send us the report after. We'd say when you get to this certain point, let's go over what you've done and move on from there.
Sorry, more talking about them as your employees.
Okay.
And what I can learn from that with my employees.
Fine. I think we probably answered that with the proportionality side and making sure when they join the organisation that things are very structured contractually. I think that negates a lot of the issues moving forward, and just having them regular conversations, our employees, as they join the company. I think that negates a lot of the issues. To Dan's point earlier, if we see any disgruntledness, it might be nothing to do with the business, it might be outside of our parameters and outside of our help. At that point, we do have the sit downs and make sure that that's not going to impact the business. I'm not sure if it answers your question, but we're quite a small business at the moment, so luckily we haven't come across many big HR issues in terms of what we do. I'm sure we'll hit it quite a lot as we grow, hopefully, but yeah, I think just having them honest and open conversations as people join, that's got to be good for any business, isn't it? It's particularly in this field when you're doing these, what some would class as intrusive investigations. But our remit and our luck, I guess, comes from we're doing it for clients that want us to do it. So we never really get in them muddy waters, which is good.
Thank you very much. That's all we've got time for. So a big thank you to Ruby and Samina, and also to Ben for that bit. Thank you very much. Before we go, massive thank you to Anna, James, John, Rebecca, and other James for the support organising this, but particularly to Anna because she's been making sure that everybody has come here tonight, done all the organisations, all the table decoration. So big round of applause to the team and Anna.